Of February 2016. It's time for us to focus on person of interest. And the person of interest we have this morning is one that I would liken to Robin Hood. Robin Hood, for those of you that might be familiar with the story, made sure that he fought for the cause of the less fortunate and those that he felt did not have a voice to speak. And well, he'll be letting us know whether that's his cause or not. I'm talking about none other than Okiya Omtata, and he's in the studio. But before I introduce him to you and we begin his journey and also just finding out who really he is, here are just some of the reminders to refresh your memory on some of the antics that we have seen him participate in. And I'm sure one of the things that you'll remember about Okiya Omtata is when he had chained himself at the police headquarters. But thank you for joining us, Mr. Omtata, and great to have you. But before we get to some of the things that you've been involved in and how you get there, first of all, maybe just give us a background of who Okiya Omtata is, where you grew up and where you went to school, and just some of those basics.
Well, I was born in a village in Busia, Teso South District, a village called Kwangamor. Kwangamor means white rocks. So I grew up in that village, and I think for the first 12 years of my life, I never traveled outside a radius of 30 kilometers from the place I was born. Yeah. So basically that's how I lived, and the first big city I ever saw was Tororo in Uganda, because we are near the border. So even we used to get TV, you could watch Uganda TV, not Kenyan TV, and we could move to, even our letters, I remember my father's mailing box was 187 Tororo, Uganda. So he used to go to Uganda.
Your mail used to come through
through Uganda, not through Kenya.
Okay.
And that also had a defining effect on me, because then from very early on I realized there was a Ugandan and there was a Kenyan. So most of the time you would get that the communities across are the same community, but they refer to the other one as a Ugandan, they refer to the other one as a Kenyan.
So this for you made you realize that people segregate despite the fact that they are one community?
Yeah, despite the fact that they were lawyers or Tesos, those in Uganda were Ugandans, those in Kenya were Kenyans. And that is one thing that informed me about my nationhood. And I find that really a challenge for people who come like from Central, who never are able to realize what being a Kenyan is, because they are surrounded by one community. You move to Nairobi, still you are dominant, and there's no difference. So at the end of the only difference you see is you being Kikuyu or you being Luo. And so for us, people who come from the border, the idea of nationhood somehow hits you very early in your life.
What difference does it have, though? Because the fact that, I mean, even if you're at the border, you still have, you're surrounded by, yes, there's the Ugandan, but you also have the Luo community on one side, you have the Luya, you have maybe the I mean, you have those communities still.
Yeah, but still you find that the bigger thing that really defines you, like if you are one tribe, but part of the tribe is called Ugandan, part of the tribe is called Kenyan, and even for me, like for us in my clan, when we die, we are buried facing the shrine of the Chavasinga, the king of the Basoga. We buried facing.
That is now Uganda.
We faced east. And why did we face there? Because we came from there. So there's a very strong association with Uganda. But still, with all those things that you do and what have you, you are still defined as a Kenyan. And you'll find that from my home to Kampala, so I think it's about 4 hours. My home to Nairobi is 8 hours.
So you're closer
So,
to Kampala then?
yeah, so all these things come and they define you. And so when you now eventually realize that you are a Kenyan, there's something called Kenya that defines you in a very, very dominant way. That when you want to progress, you are moving towards Nairobi. You don't move towards Kampala and maybe towards the Congo, whereby you can, when you just dig a toilet, you might get gold. You move towards Nairobi where there are no assets, no resources. So all those things come up and define you in a way that you realize that there's something called being Kenyan. And that thing is so important in your life that it even distorts your environment and whatever. So you begin appreciating it and you begin protecting it. So for me, my background and my push that certain things be done in this country is really, really informed by my understanding that I am Kenyan.
Okay.
I am not Luya, I'm not Teso, I'm not Luo, I'm not Kikuyu, I'm not anything, I'm Kenyan. And that's my defining moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was brought about by the fact that you grew up at the border, and that defined for you being Kenyan.
Even the first president I saw was Idi Amin. When he flew one time a helicopter across and the first helicopter I saw was of Idi Amin. The first big man image in our lives was narratives about Idi Amin and the refugees running across. Then you could see that there was a difference. That just by being in this side, you are sort of protected. You are free. Being on the other side was chaos. Even people saying they could not even get salt. But in Kenya, salt is something we did not even think about. So all those things in very early played a role in informing me.
All right. Now, as you grew up, how many were you in your family?
Well, I'm from a Catholic family. And you know, Catholics are very Catholic. So my mother had 12 children.
Wow.
I'm number 5. Yeah.
And out of all of them, you are the only boy?
No, I was the first boy. And there are 4 boys and the other 8 girls. Fortunately, we all lived to adulthood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, one of the things, as I was just reading your story, is that your grandma at some point felt that she needed to dress you like a girl to protect you.
Well, the issue was that I think because there had been girls and what have you, I think one thing I was told is that before I was born, my mother was under a lot of pressure to get a son. And they even went as far as getting somebody to prepare a concoction for her or some whatever. But I hear my grandfather and my grandmother refused. And so when I was born a boy. And my grandfather used to tell me, imagine if you had allowed that shamam to give your mother concussions. He would claim that he owns you. Yeah. So that's another thing that also helped me not to believe in the occult. Yeah, those are among the other things. So,
where was the pressure coming from for them to give your
mother?
Because
my mother had given birth to 4 girls. My father is the firstborn to my grandfather. They felt she needed to have a son. So either he gets married again or he gets a traditional herbalist to give my mother a concoction to give birth to a son. But my grandfather, and it was my grandmother, I think, who had instigated that. But my grandfather refused, and I hear my father refused, and so it so happened that that is what came to pass. And
so why did she find it necessary to dress you in
well, she believed
clothes?
that because now the boy has come, maybe the evil eye would destroy me. So she wanted to disguise the fact that I was a boy. So I'm told for quite a good time I dressed up as a girl to look like my other sisters.
Did that affect you in any way? Do you remember dressing like a girl?
Yeah, I do remember a bit of bits and pieces. But I also remember that I got circumcised when in my youth, when I was a small boy. And that also marked my difference from my sisters. Because I went through a ride very early on. My father decided to circumcise me in my youth, in my early childhood. So that also
made you
I
realize
did
that
something
you had a
around
different
me,
identity.
Yeah, that gave me a different, I began realizing I had a different identity. But eventually I grew, and the relationship between me and my grandmother was fairly close. I don't know if you read my article where I said, I wrote an article saying grandma's debate with Darwin. Because, you know, we came from an area where we had very many monkeys and what have you. And as you know, and I think it is true that these baboons and monkeys don't think much of women. So my grandmother would take me along to the shamba. Now, when I had grown a bit, when I was not going to school and I was dressing like a man, and she used to believe that if she went with me, those baboons would run away and things like, because they would be seeing a man. And she used to tell me that baboons and monkeys were human beings who refused to work and degenerated into those
Baboons.
animals. And here was Darwin who says that we evolved from monkeys. So I used to say my grandmother's theory of evolution and that of Darwin. When I wrote a piece on that, and it was, if you Google it, you'll get it. But the defining thing was that she also told him that if you don't do things the right way, you degenerate. And that's one thing that's very strong in me. And you can see a lot of baboons, even in power in this country today. We are led by baboons and monkeys. People who have refused to be human beings. They don't want to work, they steal.
So the theory of your mother, your grandma still stands.
Still stands.
The
for
only
me.
thing is that they don't, they're baboons and monkeys, but dressed like and
Yeah,
walking
we're walking
like
like human beings, but they're baboons and monkeys. Look at them. Yeah.
Okay.
You get somebody steals, goes and steals money meant for education of poor children, goes and buys a vehicle worth 17 million, drives on it, he sits in that vehicle alone. What is that? That's a baboon. That's a monkey. That's not a human being.
All right. Very interesting perspective right there, I must say, Okiya. But now, what's your education background?
Well, I grew up in my local primary school, then I went to St. Paul's Amkura for 2 years. Then from there, I met some priests who put me into the seminary life. So I spent most of my time training to be a Catholic priest. And then I had to discontinue that when I got into some medical challenges. I got injured and stuff like that. And I went back, did a bit of engineering here and there.